Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a beer that we have reviewed multiple different years' releases. I think going back to maybe aged versions from 2015 or 2016, but we're jumping today into Heathen Brewing Company's annual barley wine release, Reindeer Tears. This is the 2021 release. It is an American-style barley wine that clocks in at 12% ABV, and it is bourbon barrel aged. Now, I have had multiple of these. My impressions as they age, yes, you certainly can age them, but I think that I personally prefer trying to drink them closer to the year that they were produced. Not to say I didn't enjoy the older ones, and they're certainly cellarable. It's a 12% barley wine. But I think that they're, while they do mellow and add additional character, for me it's really more of a carbonation effervescence and a sense of feeling fresher due to that carbonation activity, which even though it's wax dipped in these sealed caps, over time, if you leave them for years and years, they can get some of that lost. Frankly, for my money, if you're gonna pick a beer that's cellarable to cellar, look for one that, like you would do with a wine or a champagne, is corked, not with a cap, even if it's wax dipped. But nonetheless, we're gonna jump right into the label art. As always, it's got the kind of maniacal looking Santa on there. That is their label art, and it is wax dipped, so we're going to use our trusty pointy bottle opener to score underneath the edge of this wax, as always. And this is not having a problem getting underneath there. Some of it's already cracking and dropping onto my table here, so we'll have a good spot for leverage right here. All right, we're using our stout glass, which does work quite well for barley wines. So, nothing much else to talk about. Heathen Brewing Company out of Vancouver, Washington. 2021 release, bourbon barrel aged Reindeer Tears barley wine. All right, giving it a pour. This is that classic quintessential barley wine color. This is the most common. It's that true deep caramelly color, though, as we've discussed often, they can run the gamut in any color of the wheel spectrum, really, at all. They can be super light, super pale. They can be absolutely pitch black. But this caramel color, this is the typical hue that you will see on a barley wine. And I'm already smelling it out of this glass. It is a pronounced aroma. The bourbon really jumps out at you, and these classic barley wine aromas I'm already starting to get as well. I remember this about this beer. The aroma is quite pungent on it. But let's get a visual look. Yeah, absolutely true, deep, golden, caramel color. Very much the classic barley wine hue that you do see more often than not. This is quite active in terms of carbonation. Like I said, at least with this specific beer and that specific cap that they do even with the wax dip, I do find that it has more carbonation and it gives a better overall drinking experience if you don't let it sit for years and years and years. You can do it, but don't expect this level of activity or this head formation. It's very active, very tight, fine champagne-like bubbles, formed a nice creamy head on top. We're going to get right up over this for a full sniff. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Once you get right up over the glass, it's even more amplified what you get when you're a foot away from it. It's big notes of bourbon, and you do get classic barley wine aromas of figs and plums, tons of caramel, tons of toffee. That is all that you need to know about the aroma on this. It's the barrel plus the beer itself, and it smells absolutely fantastic. It is hugely pungent. If you crack this within a foot and a half of anybody and pour it into a glass, they're going to start to smell that barley wine and the bourbon. It's absolutely fantastic. So without further ado, let's jump in, see what this 2021 release is about. Ooh, yeah. There it is. I obviously haven't had one of these since last year, I believe. Yeah, oh, wow. This is just a tremendous barley wine. This is extremely well done. It's got all of the layers of complexity that I know and love about a barley wine. And indeed, I think bourbon barrels really do, in particular, work well with barley wines. I've had barley wines that have had barrel aging of different varieties. I think bourbon just really pairs well with all of the complexity and nuance that you get in a beer style as big as a barley wine. It's so layered, as is bourbon, and bourbon barrel aging adds all these additional subtleties and layers underneath it. So before we even get into the flavor profile, let's talk texture. The body on this, it's a heavy beer. It's a 12% barley wine. It's very, very heavy, as you would expect. It's got massive weight to it. This is a slow sipping over multi-hour, especially a big, tall bottle like this. This is not a beer you're going to get through in 20, 30 minutes or even an hour. If it takes you under 2 hours, you're probably going through the barley wine too quickly. But nonetheless, absolutely great texture and weight. The mouthfeel on this is quite resistant. Again, this is a 12% ABV beer. That is to be expected. And this is one of those where really as you agitate around the palate, you can just feel this incredible resistance. This one is quite viscous, and it doesn't really get creamy or foamy or silky at all when you agitate around the palate, but you can really feel just how much resistance it has. It's impressive, and it pairs perfectly with that body. So big body, big resistant mouthfeel. Now let's get to the flavor profile. This is one of those barley wines that you don't get this all that often in them, but it does have a pronounced and noticeable hop bite. And there is a reason for that. Indeed, they tell us on the label here exactly what they used. Chinook, Centennial, and Cascade. These would not be out of place in an IPA hop bill. They're big. They bring a lot of different hop character, both in terms of aroma and flavor profile, but almost more importantly, they are high alpha acid content hop varieties, and they clearly use more than you would find in your average barley wine because it has a very distinct and noticeable hop bittering bite right up front in tandem with all of the layers of complexity that you would expect to find in a barley wine and indeed that bourbon barrel. So now let's talk about this flavor profile. When you first swallow, the first thing that hits you is that bourbon, and you get the distinct spirit flavor from that barrel aging, followed by a lot of the classic bourbon subtleties that kind of interplay. I get big, big vanilla, and I get candied brown sugar. There's a little element of char underneath it as well, and it's not smoky, but it's that distinct flavor that you would find in a bourbon. And this pairs beautifully with the myriad classic barley wine traits that also come through in the flavor profile. In this one, it's very much dominated by fig and plum, and tons of caramel and toffee. Sometimes you'll get apricot, sometimes you'll get peach, sometimes you'll get various rind, you'll get kind of wine-like qualities and grape notes, and all of these other subtleties. In this one, it's very strong of fig and plum in tandem with caramel and toffee. That's the four dominant, very common barley wine flavor traits that you find in this flavor profile, and indeed, it matches what you get on the nose. It's these deep, rich, dark fruit. And I gotta say in this one, as with many barley wines, it's much more like if you were making some kind of confection, a pie, a cobbler. It's kind of candied versions, which draws out the richness and kind of intensifies the depth of those flavors. So you just get constant ribbons and layer of flavoring all between the malt bill and the yeast strain itself, in tandem with the subtleties coming in and out from the barrel that they chose to age it. So there's really no surprises here. It's just extremely well done. It's a classic bourbon barrel aged barley wine. There's a reason I keep getting this one year after year. Never know, they might tweak something. It could be slightly different, but even if it's only a once a year beer drinking experience, it's always great to revisit because it is extremely well done. This is a great example of an American barley wine done right. So, a lot of complexity here. Sipping into it, it's like reuniting with a long-lost old friend. I'm going to jump back in for a second sip. We're going to talk about the balance. We're going to talk about the finish and make sure I didn't miss any other key elements. But it's absolutely delicious yet again here for this 2021 release. Big, impressive beer. Immediate hop bittering bite in tandem with that bourbon barrel. You get the char, you get vanilla, you get caramelized brown sugar, And then you really start to get an even bigger intensification of the hop bittering. It really comes through. And yeah, it's a blend of hops that don't always project these specific elements. Well, this singular, in this case, how it comes through in this beer, it's very much an earthy bittering. So there's no floral, there's no citrus, nothing like that. It's very earthy, which for what this beer is, I think it comes through very, very well. So you're getting big notes of that bourbon barrel. All of these ebbing and flowing, and almost immediately within that first 1 or 2 seconds when your brain processes, oh, what just hit my palate, you get tons and tons of caramel and toffee. And the toffee notes in this in particular are probably my favorite because it's the type that I like the most in a big beer like this. And it's buttery, it's rich, it's like a butter toffee, almost like butter toffee popcorn, something like that. It's along that lines of that toffee characteristic, and it's absolutely incredible. So tons of flavoring and flavor, tons of aroma. It's just a big, bold, in-your-face beer drinking experience, which you do expect from a big barrel-aged barley wine, and this is no different. In terms of the balance, I would say that the balance is exactly right. They used a good quality bourbon barrel. They left it in for a really nice amount of time. If anything, it feels like maybe they barrel aged it longer than the average, because it really does get a lot of pronounced character, both aromatic and flavor-wise, from that bourbon barrel. And it really plays to the strengths of this beer style, because all of these interweaving layers of flavor and aroma, they're just constantly moving in and out and ebbing and flowing. With every passing second, you're getting something different mixing with something else. And that's one of the reasons I really, really enjoy this barley wine as well as I do. Absolutely fantastic beer. Another thing on this one that maybe is not quite the norm, you get it on some barley wines. It is a big high ABV in your face flavor-wise beer, but it's got a very long finish. And this, it's really two-pronged, the reason for it. It's intensity of the bourbon barrel that just absolutely coats and haunts the back of the palate in tandem with that hop bite. I was not kidding when I say that this has a really big kick of hop bitters. They were not shy about it, and that lingers in tandem with that bourbon on the back of the palate, as well as my favorite key flavor trait you get from the barley wine itself. That's that kind of buttery toffee. So it's those three things that linger on the back of the palate. And this has a pretty normal bell curve. Obviously, it's immediate intensity, and then it kind of peaks, plateaus, holds for a little bit, and then it's a very, very slow, steady descent all the way down to the finish. This is just an absolutely incredible barley wine. This 2021 release is just as good as the prior year's releases I've had. I am a massive fan. I will always come back to this one. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, quote my scores. When we come back, we'll get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Heathen Brewing Company's Reindeer Tears, the 2021 release. This is an American barley wine that has been bourbon barrel aged. 12% ABV on this one. Heathen Brewing is based in Vancouver, Washington. So this is a beer that I've had every release since their 2016, I believe. It's one I come back to every year, and for a really, really good reason. They're all really, really great. Yes, you can age high ABV beers like this, like barley wines. For my money, I wouldn't let it go too many years because it does start to lose carbonation, as I discussed, even though it is wax dipped. If you're going to pick a beer for aging, in my humble opinion, look for one that's been corked. They'll typically have a cage as well. It just does a little better at keeping the carbonation in there. That notwithstanding, I got to say, I think that this 2021 release, just like all the prior I've had, is super consistent. And this, for my money, perhaps because I've had it closest to the production date, was easily the best. So going to the scores, this is one of those that I don't need to go over anything in detail. This did get a perfect 10 out of 10 in all categories for a total score of 100, and it was well earned. Everything about this beer was just perfectly executed. The aroma, the balance in particular, I'll always come back to this, the balance between the malt bill and the yeast strain in tandem with the barrel especially for a big barrel-aged beer. Having the right balance between the beer, letting it speak and all the nuances there, and the barrel as well, you got to get it just right, and Heathen did exactly that. This is one of my favorite barley wines. I keep coming back to it every year, and I expect I will continue that trend. If you're a fan of these barley wines or any barrel-aged beer, high ABV, these big ones, slow sippers, this is definitely one to keep on your radar. They release it every year. If you've never had it, I do highly recommend trying to get your hands on one. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit that bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.